Welcome to The Bundle is Back, connecting consumers, content, and broadband in the streaming age. While it ultimately became too big and expensive for consumers to afford, the traditional pay TV bundle was, at its peak, a fantastic mechanism for folks to find all the content they wanted in one easily searchable place. But in a post cord cutting era, streaming has not so much fragmented the audience as it has atomized it. Consumers who have more content choices than ever still crave that bundled ease and simplicity. And their broadband providers still have a vested interest in connecting them to the content they love while making that content easily searchable and discoverable. Today, we have MyBundle co-founder and CEO Jason Cohen, who is virtually sitting down with me, next TV editor Daniel Frankel, for a fireside chat to discuss the next generation of the bundle and how content creators and ISPs can use it to build scale and reduce churn, and how consumers can use it to better navigate streaming's tricky terrain. So we'll start right in. Jason, you are on the front line of we sometimes call the new bundle, working with broadband service providers and streaming companies to simplify streaming for their customers. Briefly, because we're going to get to all of this over the next 40 minutes, tell us who your clients are and what you do for them.
Sure, Daniel. Thanks again for having me. This is really excited for this call. So when we think about it, we think of them as stakeholders. Really, maybe to and we'll dive into all three of them. But number one, consumers. Number two, three are streaming services and broadband providers. So I might say ISP, BSP throughout the next 40 minutes. They're sort of interchangeable, but the
Right.
internet or broadband service provider, and we think the great thing of what we get into is there's a lot of win-win-wins that are tying these three together, as opposed to right them each having their own positives or negatives or competing. And so ultimately, this shift to streaming has gotten kind of all of them in a tricky spot, right? Everyone's trying to figure out what to do, and there are unique pain points that we can go over for each one. But technology, right? Like it's solved and helped a lot of other industry transformations. Like it's right there. It's there to be fixed. And there's, our opinion is that coming out the other side, it's going to look a lot better than it ever did.
Sure. So it is a convoluted, disrupted, we hear that term a lot, time in media. Perusing your resume, you came from the finance world. You could have started up in any industry you chose. Why, oh, why streaming?
Right. It's a great question. And I don't know the direct answer other than for whatever reason, when I was listening to earnings calls, specifically in the media telecom space, I found myself drawn into like, whoa, this is going to get a lot more confusing. But also at the other side of it is there's a solution. So, I covered online travel agencies and the retailers and seeing how the internet disrupted and changed those businesses. I think we're all better off on the other side. Right. And so ultimately, I sat there and I said, for a year, why isn't somebody building X, Y, and Z? And after about a year of sitting there is when I finally said, I do like this job, but you know what? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think it's only, like I said, going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Sure.
And there's a real need for somebody to step up and do it. And maybe, again, what's unique about me? I wasn't a technologist. I can't code. I brought on my brother for that. Right. Ultimately, though, it was, hey, I saw broadband. We invested. I understood that space. I saw what was happening in media. And you know what? Those are two different spaces. And so from 30,000 feet up, it was like, there's something there. And so
Right.
it's kind of went with the you only live once. So let's see what we can build. And as I say, join the real world from the fake world of finance is how I describe it.
So you're not in the valley. You're working from a bunker in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Uh,
Seems like a nice place.
Thankfully, they got nice blue skies in the bunkers down here. No,
Yeah,
yes, I'm down in Fort Lauderdale. The other Hollywood, Florida,
but
is what I say.
covering you and we talk semi frequently. You're on the grow. You've got a distributed team working for you now. You're up to the last I checked, a small army of distributed workforce. You've just made some hires. Where are you in terms of the startup growth food chain? Where are stages of development, I guess.
Yeah, so just the for as MyBundle, we spent a couple of years what we call building MyBundle 1.0, which was really
Right.
setting the foundation and serving, frankly, mostly the broadband industry, right? Like solving problems that they had today, which we'll probably get into it, but helping them win new broadband customers, retain those broadband customers, and really make their customers and shoppers' lives simpler. MyBundle 2.0, as we're sort of now embarking on, and we've grown the team from about 7 to 17 people now. Somebody started just today. This Monday was their first day. And the idea here, what is, MyBundle 2.0 about is really leaning in on the streaming service side and providing the solutions to the streaming industry that are also, again, the same solutions that consumers and our broadband partners are looking for. And so, this 2.0 concept is it's not really doing anything different. It's now having the workforce distributed, like you said, we're fully remote. We're all four corners of the country, and really being able to lean in and do a lot of things better and do more, and really start to spin that flywheel. To use another overused business term like disruption, but really feel like there's a real flywheel bringing our stakeholders together.
So speaking of those stakeholders, they come from different parts of the business. On one side, you have these broadband service providers who've spent collectively billions of dollars creating network infrastructure over the last several years, and they've largely forsaken traditional linear video. The licensing costs just got too expensive. Consumers were priced out of the market. Cord cutting happened, but they still want video because it's sticky, reduces churn, proliferates their business. You've got the streaming companies, which want to acquire customers at a reduced cost and want to reduce churn. And then you've got consumers who face this, as we said, atomized list of choices. So you've got all that milieu going on, distilling it and focused on one. In the year of our Lord 2023, I'm going to ask a dumb question because I think I know the answer. Are consumers still struggling to figure out how to stream and what to stream?
So
Let's
I
start.
think it's a great question. I'll say to your first, how to stream. No, what's exciting is more and more people, like, they know what Netflix is. To give Netflix the lead dog credit on how to get Netflix on their Roku. That's fine. I can say I have yet to meet a person who, when they ask, what do you do? It's like, oh, well, I have this company, we have this My Bundle, here's what we're doing. And it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what we need, right? No one, I never met anybody who's like, actually, this is all fairly simple, and I know where all my shows are and movies, and I can keep. So the problem is massively widespread, and it's not specifically a technology problem, right? So you could be a tech savvy 28-year-old or 18-year-old or 22-year-old, or a tech proficient 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old. We are not going for the people in their 90s. We're going to say, you've handled traditional the right way or for long enough. We don't need to fix that or help them particularly. Although we'll try. We certainly have people in our 80s that use our tools. But fundamentally, it's not so much it's a I don't understand how to use streaming as a technology. It's that, like you said, atomized. The industry and the space is so fragmented that bringing discovery back together, and by the way, not necessarily on the TV screen. One thing I'm fond of saying is like the TV screen is the best place in the house to consume content, but it's the worst screen on the house to discover content and manage your content. And so we think that that's a big part of what we're focused on is how do we use this, right? And how do we make this and the computer and other devices part of this and solve those pain points that consumers have. And like I said, also solve the streaming services pain points. And we can go through kind of each one, right? Like,
Right.
very simple, streaming services, they're looking for new customers, but there's a churn problem, right? Because it's easy. It's a lot easier than it was when we try to cancel a cable package. But it's not, even when there is churn, it's how do you reclaim those customers? And so, really, new customer acquisition, retaining customers, and the churn that will be there, how do you reclaim it? And it's not just how do you do it, but how do you do it efficiently, right? And so, if you ask somebody at a streaming service, I'm pretty sure they tell you, well, if we can show that we've got great content, everyone thinks their content's great, and there's a ton of amazing shows on, let's say, the streaming services numbers 3 to 8. that if I go to my TV and the first app I put on is Netflix or Prime, and I don't then go to the next apps to find shows, like how much content is sitting there that just people don't have a discovery mechanism. So the
Right.
streaming services want consumers to know, and the consumers want to, like, how many times have you talked to a friend and you sort of hear like, oh, it just feels like there's nothing to watch. There's a bunch of good stuff to watch that people haven't heard of that their friends might know. So we think that again, that opportunity, it's both problems. I can't find something to watch. How do I tell consumers I have all this great content? Again, it's solved by technology. And then our broadband providers come in because they want to have happy customers. And we enable them to be that solution provider, to that. So it's whether it's, somebody who's streaming for the first time because they're exiting the traditional cable facilities based pay TV service, or somebody who has five, six streaming services already. There's a lot to be done to help them as well.
So just, I mean, to clarify on a 101 level for folks who are not real familiar with the company, you're not a direct to consumer product. You're dealing primarily at this point with internet service providers, and you've had a lot of traction with kind of tier two, tier three cable companies looking for a way to sort of make that equation simpler. I think of the the NCT, NTC, NTCC, the cooperative. They're a client, and maybe I don't know if you want to name drop specifically, but I think your list is over 200 at this point, or approaching 200 ISPs in the U.S. Um, and you reached a pretty astounding consumer base. Maybe you could talk about the scale at this point.
Yeah, so I would say so we actually have our broadband partnerships and we have our MyBundle.tv, straight on MyBundle, and some actually other partnerships outside of the broadband space. The reason why we focus so much on broadband is because like there are certain value propositions that we bring to their businesses that make that synergy happen. So just like for instance, a broadband provider who never had video before is often competing with the Comcasts and the Charters of the world, right?
Right.
Or another cable provider. And so when they knock on that person's door and say, literally knock on the person's door and say, hey, we've got a gig for 50, $60, come switch over to us. The person says, great, but what do I do about TV, right? For the 60% of the country or the 50% of the country now that still needs traditional TV. And so our tools come in and say, hey, you don't need traditional TV anymore. You can use one of the virtual MVPDs, YouTube TV, Direct TV Stream, Sling, Hulu Live, Friendly. Even more exciting, I think, like Max now has their Bleacher Report sports package, and all the regional sports networks, or a lot of them, are going direct. And now the Jazz and the Coyotes and the Suns are available over the air. So, thinking about this whole fragmentation, if you're an individual broadband provider, whether you have 2,000 customers or 2 million customers, you really don't want to keep track of all of that. And it's insane to try, frankly, right? Like, there's no reason to. And so our one platform enables all these broadband providers to sort of solve those problems and more for their customers. And so when you take, again, back to this concept of what have we been focused on, it's solving problems for the broadband providers. Our broadband, and mostly a lot on the shopping side, the internet shopping side. But when you add up all the broadband customers of the people, we're at 187 right now. Hopefully, by the time this airs, it might be hopefully in the 190s, right? But ultimately, they've got over 11 million internet customers, and all of these broadband customers are consumers like you and me, from 18 years old all the way up to 75 years old.
Right.
And whether the provider has cable or is no longer in the TV business or never had it or is shutting it down, right? Every one of those consumers is streaming something and is going to be streaming more in the future. And that's the opportunity. Like back to the concept of building better bundles, or how do we bundle this together? It's not even just about discovery. It's actually about allowing these broadband providers to now give streaming credits, right? Or to give streaming services to their customers like the big boys can. And that's what we're enabling today and into the future.
Now you just signed a pretty, for you, a pretty groundbreaking deal with Bango, a technology company in the UK that works with Verizon on their Plus Play, has a lot of relationships, can sort of simplify that process, allow you to sort of ease those pain points in a more efficient way. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think it's, when we look at this ecosystem, we're like, look, there's a lot of things that we choose to do ourselves, and there's many more that we say, hey, who can we partner with, right? Bringing together the various players in the ecosystem. And while we today have billing integrations with streaming services and can do more direct deals as well, what we said is, look, there's a bunch of streaming services out there who've already done the technology integration into this platform, bingo, right?
Right.
And so we said, like, hey, if we're going to have conversations with those streaming services, and they have to say, well, this sounds amazing, but I got to get my product team, and how long is it going to take? And so while we have the ability to build directly, we said, what would make this really happen a lot quicker is let's partner with Bingo, right? Bingo's already done those integrations. So now when we're having those direct conversations with streaming services, which is still right, the economic deal, if you will, is still between MyBundle and the streaming service. Those conversations can get to like a great, here's all the things that we're going to do, right? That MyBundle is going to do with consumers and our broadband providers. And when it comes to like, oh, well, and how are we going to authenticate the users? Oh, we got our great partners, Bango here. And that's where, again, what's really exciting is I think it could accelerate certainly the opportunity, again, not just for MyBundle, right? We're sort of I mentioned earlier, there are three stakeholders. We're obviously the fourth. And the underlying vision or mission or belief of the company is that if we can add value to streaming services, to broadband providers, and to consumers, then enough value will trickle down to MyBundle all the way at the end, right? So fundamentally, the solution that we're now bringing to the marketplace is to say to a streaming service, you connect with MyBundle. The more streaming services that connect with MyBundle, the more value not only do we bring to broadband providers and consumers, but we actually bring to the streaming industry themselves in this concept of not just bundling streaming with broadband, but bundling streaming services with each other in a way that they are actively calling for, themselves right now, like looking for somebody to do it. And, we're right here.
So I'm gonna step back or fly up a little bit to 10,000 feet and consider what Paramount Global CEO Bob Bakish talked about last week, the hard bundle he called it, taking streaming platforms like Paramount Plus and making them part of the linear package. And that was sort of an offshoot on what Disney and Charter agreed to a couple of months ago with Disney Plus and the flagship ESPN, et cetera. You uh, have the good fortune of being ahead of the trend here. Um, Talk about that for a little bit. Content providers clearly want this, and you have sort of a pole position in being able to enable it for these smaller service providers. What does this look like? Is it I at some point in the near term future, as a having access to my bundle, can choose from a selection of hundreds of SVODs and FASTs and assemble a bundle at discount prices? What does it all look like?
Yeah, great question there. So I would say yes, you laid out that ideal solution for everybody. I think is the ability to have hundreds of streaming services beyond other kinds of services, being that subscription manager for the consumer. One bundle, one place. The concept of a hard bundle versus a soft bundle. I mean, it's really not my place per se to say how it should work. What should the world look like? I think if somebody's paying for cable, they should probably get the content from the SVOD services on. That's what obviously Disney and Charter kind of was about. The question becomes if I'm a broadband provider well, the increasing number of non-pay TV customers, right, who are just taking broadband only, that's the group where we think there's a better way to bundle, right? Like there's gotta be, and there is, it's not even a gotta be. And I think what's really interesting, and I'll just use it as an example because it's probably the most popular bundle, is the Disney Plus bundle, right? And so ultimately you get Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. There's a really big discount. Disney is telling you, here is the discount that we think a bundle is worth, right? I'm sure they've got a ton of data scientists figuring out what that different pricing should be with ads, without ads. And so our proposition is like, sure, a lot of people want that Disney bundle, but they also have other streaming services, right?
Right.
And it's something that David Zaslav or Bakish was talking about, this concept of, hey, we need the consumers. They're saying the consumers are all confused. We need to figure out how to do this, or big tech will do this to us. And I think, again, our view is like they're right, right? There needs to be a better way to do this. Big tech is going to do it. I think, we put forward in our, let's say, pitch to a streaming services. We aren't big tech. I call we're little tech, right? But that's where we can work together and do things like in a non-competitive way to really help build those bundles. And so, yes, I think that future state is, if I'm a broadband provider, or even if I'm not getting it through my broadband, consumers should have an easy way to purchase and manage their bundles. And our view, again, back to, it's not just about winning, it's about retaining and getting them back, right? It's I bought a streaming service, I think an equal part, and what we really believe, and it's something a lot of the stuff we're working on the TV shows and movie side, is it's not just I bought a service, I didn't just buy Paramount Plus, but somebody is telling me the great shows on Paramount Plus, right? And if, by the way, and if I cancel because I watched season 1 and 2 of Mayor of is it Mayor of
Easttown.
Easttown, right? Mayor of Easttown, and like remind me when season 3 is coming back. Like those are the things that my bundle. Again, we're building a lot of this stuff currently, but if you think about it holistically, what we're solving for and what we think needs to be solved for, that's obviously why we're building it, is that holistic solution. It's not just an app store. It's an app store. It's a subscription manager, but it goes beyond that, right? And it goes beyond that to help consumers. But again, very importantly, we think helping streaming services as well. And when it comes to broadband, just so that this last piece, when it comes to broadband, our broadband providers want to contribute money. They want to do things like, hey, when you upgrade to a gig, we'll give you $15-$20 of streaming credit for a certain amount of time.
Right.
And so that ultimately is like, we have, if you're a streaming service, that sounds wonderful, right? You get the broadband provider kicking in some money. Maybe you offer, maybe there's discounts down the road when you buy multiple streaming services together. And so now all of a sudden, as the consumer, I'm being able to manage all this stuff. I'm getting content recommendations, building watch lists, learning things from friends over what shows they like, and everything's cheaper. So I'm going to be less likely to churn from broadband, less likely to churn from streaming services. And we all lived happily ever after. That's the idea.
Right. So there's you speak of this sort of holistic picture. There's a software component to it, which is trying to kind of solve for this holy grail problem, search and discovery, leading people to the sort of personalized selection that works for them when they turn on the television, cut down on that 9 minutes or whatever it is of the selection process that everybody talks about. And then there's a kind of an economic efficiency equation that you're also solving for, bundling at discount prices for the consumer, and you're working with individual streaming providers to sort of solve for that too. You and I think a few weeks ago talked about this antenna research study recently that 33% of SVOD users are serial churners. So you have a powerful proposition to offer these guys, who you can make their services churn less. Maybe you could talk about this. What is the sale to the platforms at this point?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the retain and reclaim, let's say, part of the puzzle. I think we all know churn is going to happen, right? I think,
Right.
are they I was stepping back a second. I think I don't know, and we all don't know what things are going to look like 5 to 10 years from now, right? Because I think there's still so much opportunity for technology to play a role in different kinds of subscriptions, and is it discounts for different time periods, and what does that look like? But I think just taking the world as it is today and looking forward just a little bit, people are going to cancel streaming services. They're going to come back. If you're a streaming service, do you want to pay a full SAC cost to bring that person back? Or is there a better way to do that? Is it sometimes, and frankly, I think if you're a consumer, I know I speak for myself, the harder it is that a service, streaming or otherwise, makes to cancel, the less likely I'm going to come back. So I think there is this kind of back to this holistic game that, again, being, if I was at a streaming service, they're all tied to each other. How hard do we make it to cancel? Well, if I make it easier to cancel, I better make sure that there's a good way for me to win that person back. They'll be happier, but how do I tell them about the new shows? How do I tell them? And frankly, it's probably not email. again, so like sending emails that probably end up in a promotional folder on Gmail to say a new show, is that the right answer? Or is there a way that, again, we're biased, but if somebody is bringing it all together and bringing in your TV show and movie recommendations across all your streaming services and solving you the customer's problem, then we become that guide that you can come back to. Ultimately, that churn, we want it to go lower, but there still will be churn. And how do you lower that? How do you lower your SAC cost? How do we team up, right? And how does everybody get aligned so that everybody is incentivized to move in that same direction? Listen, the benefit of this business ultimately is the high incremental margins of an incremental streamer when you don't count marketing costs, right? So if you have to spend a ton of money getting a new customer, bringing them back and bringing them back, yikes, what does that look like? But if you only pay when that customer is a customer and somebody else is doing the remarketing for you, I think that's a pretty sweet proposition any sense of on a business sense.
Now you're working with, I think the total was 150, 155 streaming companies at this point. That you have relationships with. What will this
Well,
look
yeah.
like?
So what we have we have one of our tools is called the streaming marketplace. Think of it like an app store, right? We brand
Right.
it for all of our partners. We have it on our own site. Whether we have a relationship with them or not, we have it that we call them a shingle, right? There's a shingle up there for somebody to learn about the streaming service or discover. We took the approach back to MyBundle going number, at the bottom of our stakeholder list. It's not valuable to a consumer if all we're doing is selling three services because we have a good deal with those three services, right?
Right.
Like, so we're always thinking about like how do we bring that value. And so, I'll just give you an example. The Utah Jazz this year, now they're available on Antenna. They have their own streaming service. I haven't spoken to anybody at the Jazz yet, but we're like, hey, cool. There's
Yeah, it's
millions
expensive.
of people in that area, and like, we created the app and we wrote a blog post and we put that information up there because, again, ultimately we have some broadband providers in Utah. Now they can help their customers learn where to stream the Jazz. Ultimately, our goal is to have a relationship. I'm using the Jazz as an example because I actually listened to a podcast. But ultimately, right, we want to have relationships with every single one of those apps, but we don't wait until like there's business and money on the table before we're willing to go. If we can help our other constituents, we're doing that as well.
You mentioned kind of a fragment. I've watched at least half a dozen DTC services for pro teams launch just within the last 2 months as the regional sports network ecosystem breaks down with the Diamond Valley Sports bankruptcy. A lot of volatility there, and a lot of road to pave. How do we mentioned kind of this Bango deal and how it uh, integrates billing and et cetera for my bundle. If you could sort of talk about maybe an example, a consumer example of the long-term vision. A year from now, 2 years from now, I log on to my bundle through my service provider. I wanna subscribe to 2 or 3 services at once. I want economic efficiencies. I want the services I want specifically. What will that look like? What will my consumer experience be?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. I think ultimately, one piece of the puzzle is we're mixing live like regional sports in. Like, listen, consumers are gonna, if they're a basketball fan, they're gonna take the regional sports network for basketball season, right? They're not gonna pay. I shouldn't say not all. I think what's also interesting, just very very quickly, is there might be super fans that want that off season interviews and all that stuff, and but it's a
Right.
triangle, right? Then you're going to get fewer and fewer. Now the biggest base, my personal opinion, is we're going to head to like you can buy packages, just like you buy season tickets. You could buy 8 games, 16 games, 32 games. This idea that it's only a monthly subscription, I don't think that's going to be the way it stays because it just there's the technology allows us to sell so many different ways. It doesn't need to be monthly anymore, and it doesn't need to be single game either. So that's one thing on the RSNs, and I think it's exciting that consumers who don't have cable can now subscribe to watch. Right, it going over the air to the antenna is another conversation.
I
But
mean,
how do I? Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna ask, I mean, do you see it evolving over time where, My Bundle has sort of merchandising discussions with some of these DTC platforms and mixes in a full season price tag that's slightly discounted so that you get in, you know, with an SVOD service or two, a consumer buys sort of a holistic, varied package. that is cheaper than it would be otherwise if they signed up for it individually.
Yeah, so I think, listen, there's we'll call it utopian, right? The ideal version is what I think about when we started my bundle, is that it would be very jet.com-ish. If you remember, jet.com was bought by Walmart, but their whole shtick was taking on Amazon and saying if you buy
Okay, we
this, it
did.
costs 4.99. But if you add this to your basket, it's 4.99 plus 4.99, it's now 8.99. And if you're willing to accept 8 days shipping instead of 3 days shipping, it goes to 7.99. They built a whole really, really smart algorithm to try to get people as cheap as they can. So, without going that far down the rabbit hole, yeah, our idea is like there doesn't need to be pre-made bundles. Can we sell a package of two services together at a lower price point? Absolutely. But allowing consumers to bundle services, building their own bundle, and having it sort of algorithmically figuring out what the proper discount. I think the streaming services, I can't really speak for them, but theoretically they should be into that, right? Because if you're part of a bundle, there's going to be less churn. I think everybody agrees with that, right?
Right.
It's a tale as old as time. Obviously, you throw the broadband provider in even better. But ultimately, that's how we see the world heading, right? What streaming services do I want now? And if I cancel, right, I lose some of the bundle economics when I cancel one of those streaming services. But it should, I don't, again, should it be I bought these four together and I want to cancel one, so I have to cancel all four and then subscribe to another service that has three? That doesn't really make sense. But it should be like, if four services cost $5 each, that's $20. Maybe you get those four for $15. And when you cancel one, it's not three for 15, like meaning like the prices can adjust. And those are solutions that can be solved by technology, right? Like, frankly, like not that difficult, right? It's a business question, getting all the parties on board and to buy in, and I think that's where we're heading because that is ultimately a really good solution, right? It's good for everybody. It's good for consumers. It's also the ideal for the streaming services in that world. I believe, right? I mean, I'd love to have a conversation with somebody who said otherwise, and then I think again, you take the calendar and is it football season? Is it basketball season? Right? Maybe I'm subscribed to a virtual MVPD for 6 months of the year during football season because that's really important. But for the other
Yeah.
6 months, I don't need all of it. But so maybe I sign up for a bunch more SVODs and a service here or there in the off season because I'm consuming more of that type of content. And I think just again, helping people make those not just the switches. It's not, hey, cancel this. It's let me show you, get you more value out of the streaming services that you have by helping you find shows and movies across those streaming services. That's how we think about that proposition there.
Right. And one of the things that we didn't mention is simplified billing. It all shows up on one statement through your ISP as opposed to, one on your Chase Visa, one on your debit card, another one chasing you through a collection agency.
Well,
It's
yeah, and I think just to make that a finer point there, it's actually what's interesting is many of our ISP partners, they actually don't want it on their bill, right? What many of them are actually doing are saying, look, streaming is complicated, so we've partnered with MyBundle to help you out. And
yeah.
MyBundle is the actual. So you have what's the goal? You have one bill from MyBundle. So you buy your streaming services from MyBundle, hence
Okay.
MyBundle. It's your bundle. Now, if a broadband provider actually wants it on their bill, we actually today have ways to interconnect with the broadband provider. But what I'll tell you is most broadband providers don't want it on their bill. They want to be the ones providing the solution. They want to be the ones throwing in credits, right? And we can facilitate that. So you're a broadband customer, as part of your account, you're getting credits from your broadband provider. Maybe they're loyalty credits. Maybe it's with a higher speed package. Maybe you want to buy a package that includes streaming credits. But ultimately, right, the simplification here is for a streaming service, you just got to plug in once into MyBundle and not worry about any of that. Is ultimately the idea there. And like you said, for the consumer, I can't keep track of where one's on my Chase card, one's on my JetBlue card, one's on my other card. Here's all my services, one place. Let me manage those
Right.
subscriptions there as well.
So one thing we haven't talked about is there are app markets already out there already with big corporate names attached to them. I'm thinking of Amazon Channels, which has been around for years, more than half a decade. Verizon launched Plus Play. How does my bundle differentiate itself from those operations?
Yeah, so certainly just a distinction to make is like we're not looking to subsume. I don't know if that's the right word,
Yeah.
but we're not looking to take we're not a channel store. You're not watching the content in my bundle. You're discovering content. You're building watch lists across your services, but then you're going and you're actually watching it in the Paramount Plus app, in Netflix, in Amazon, etc. What we're thinking about is that billing integration and content discovery, right? Two separate pieces. Look, Verizon Plus Play is they're building a really cool service for Verizon customers. Obviously, most of the other app stores are device focused, whether it's
Right.
Roku, Apple, Google, Amazon. Our kind of view is, especially with the broadband providers, but in general, this is sort of like it's upstream of that. It's kind of before that. We're device agnostic, right? You buy and manage the billing integrations we have today with Sling, etc. You buy it from us, and you go watch it on any device that Sling is on, right? Obviously, we'll help you tell you which devices that is. And so our view is, we are able to be above the device, or again, device agnostic, and then work with those broadband providers. By the way, from a monetization standpoint, obviously, again, what's our business model there is we're getting that revenue from the streaming service, and we turn around and we're sharing it with the broadband providers, right? And so ultimately, right, we're thinking about how do we align everyone's incentives. So those 11 million customers, we're one email away from them. And part of
Right.
you mentioned growing the team. We just started a partner success team whose job is to help our broadband providers. We built marketing support. So we've been doing a lot of work to get ready for this, as you mentioned, the bingo announcement, which is now our, hey, streaming services of the world, or for now at least the US, although we do get calls from international broadband providers as well. We have an opportunity, we think, to fix this, right? To make this better for everybody. And that's what makes us different. So it's not just an app store where most app stores you buy an app and that's it, right? It's all about and it's a what comes next and early this coming year as we focus more on those mobile app tools and content discovery and watch lists and social recommendations. That's one of the big things that makes us, we think, different, right? We're giving these free apps out there to our broadband providers customers, our fast that we're going to have that's going to work across devices. Is this holistic experience like, hey, Mr. Consumer, Mr. Joe Smith, if I can make your streaming life simpler by helping you find TV shows and movies across your services, that's going to drive engagement of our tools. Once they are engaging with our tools, that's where there's a big opportunity to be like, okay, cool. Now also we're helping you with buy and manage your streaming services. Also, again, back from the broadband providers, those 187, there's 3,000 of them out there. Our goal is to have a lot of them, if not all of them, right? Minus the top five, if you will. And so ultimately, I think that's where it's coming at it with a holistic viewpoint, and solving each of their pain points is what really brings it all together.
Here is the what's in it for you question. It's, when you ask folks about details of monetization, it's always, how do you make money, Jason? How does monetization work?
No, I think I frankly it's an easy one, because this is the good thing about playing with those small gorillas you mentioned, the little players like Apple, Google, and Amazon out there, is the business model already exists. The streaming services are already paying them a share of revenue when
Right.
they bring them customers. What we're saying is, and I've never been a good negotiator, is we're going to be a friendlier version of that, right? Like that is our model. It's we want to help you win new customers. We want to help you retain customers. We want to help you reclaim the customers that might have churned. You know what keeps that aligned incentive? No big front. We don't want a big upfront commission. We'll take that too, but we're not looking for that. We think that behavior is unaligned incentives. It's an ongoing revenue share that actually allows people to not worry about that big SAC cost. It's pure success in a business that has very high incremental margins. Again, it works for everybody. They're already doing it. And like I said, we don't have a streaming service that competes, right? I'm not gonna,
Right.
we really truly are that independent streaming aggregator that frankly we think is really solves those problems. So that's the primary form of monetization. Like I said, we have a fast, it's coming to TV screen. We've mostly been online to date. We've been waiting, and now we're ready to bring that experience to the TV screen. It's a whole nother conversation of why we're getting into that and what we think we could do special for the broadband providers as well. But the idea is we're right monetizing the streaming services, and then we're sharing that, um, thereby incentivizing the broadband providers to get the message out as well to their own customers.
So we have time for probably another question before we should wrap this up. Um, and this is kind of a job interview question. Where do you see the industry, the video business 5 years ago from now, and your utopian vision, my bundle's role in it? What does that all look like?
Yeah, I think we still, and this is something I've been saying now for 7 years. I've always been more bearish on the traditional TV bundle. So someone would say, "Oh, it's going to be a 2% cord cutting," and I'd say it's 5%, and somebody would say, "Okay, we're losing 4% a year," and I think it's going to 8, 9,
I think
which
you
is
could.
where we're at, which we're
Yeah,
at right now. So I think what we're seeing new is the cable providers themselves looking to get out of the cable business. So my view is that the traditional bundle is going to crumble. I think I'll always be able to say this. I think it's going to crumble faster than the average person thinks, right? So that I say. So I actually believe there's more fragmentation coming, more choice, which is fantastic as long as there's a way to put it back together, right? When we thought about the name of the company, God knows how much time we thought about like Humpty Dumpty, play ons Humpty Dumpties, right? Like how we put it all together. We went with MyBundle, which is really where I think this is heading. I think that each one of us are going to have our own bundle of services, and it's not going to be the same bundle for 3 years. It might change seasonally, it might change month to month. But I think if everyone realizes and kind of understands that that is the new world, and there are going to be many tactics. I'm not saying people should give up on churn, right? There's going to be many tactics to make sure that that customer is staying with you, and I think we have that real role to play. But ultimately, that's where I see it going. I think a real interesting question is the role of an antenna. Like, how does the antenna, like a lot of the most expensive part of the TV bundle is available everywhere around us over the air. And that's why I think we're seeing with these regional sports networks now moving to over the air antenna. I think there's a lot of big questions about what happens, certainly on that front. But I think it's certainly not controversial anymore to say like the bundle is had certainly its best days behind it. More fragmentation, more atomization. I'll say this, I do not believe the world needs to only have 2 or 3 streaming services. I believe that these smaller players, and not just the top 10, but the top 150, can
mhm.
survive and thrive if there's a strong aggregator or multiple aggregators, helping consumers not just discover the service, but aggregate, make it easy to buy, make it cheaper to buy, and help them find content, shows, movies, what the whole shebang, right? I think that this industry can thrive with new streaming services popping up, serving niches. I look, the world that doesn't need my bundle is a world where there was only Netflix. And I'll just share, there was a when I was first raising money, when my bundle was just an idea, I had a guy say to me, "I don't get it. Everyone is just going to have Netflix and nothing else." And this is 4 or 5 years ago, right? And he wasn't a media guy; he was a consumer, and he probably just had Netflix, right? I think he actually said, "I don't watch much TV." So ultimately, I think that I don't believe that world is going to exist. I don't think that world should exist. There doesn't need to be a ton of consolidation, but there needs to be aggregation. And what's nice is what I can say today that if we were doing this call 2 years ago, I couldn't have said is that it seems like the streaming services themselves are ready, willing, and able to step up and
Right.
figure out these solutions to make it better for consumers. And that's really what excites me.
Well, it's important work. We don't want to live in a world where there's, I think Jason Killar's statement a few weeks ago was the everything bundle, or the one service to rule them all. And if we have uh, something to sort of aggregate and distribute blood flow to myriad options, I think it serves consumers, it serves everybody. So Godspeed to you, Jason. We'll be talking more in the coming months, weeks, and years about this. And thanks for sitting down with us today.